It arrived not with a roar, but a shimmer, a silent ripple of gamma radiation that bathed Earth in invisible light.
Oh.
Inside St. Jude's ER,
Oh my God.
Dr. Eva Rostova felt the world tilt. A sudden vertigo. When she looked up, the nightmare had begun. She turned to Nurse Miller, a friend of 10 years. But the face staring back was a blank slate. It was human, eyes, nose, mouth, but it held no familiarity. It was a biological mask. Eva blinked, terrified. She spoke Miller's name. The woman responded, but the voice was generic, flat, stripped of its unique timbre. It was the sound of a stranger. Panic seeped in like cold water. A mother in the waiting area looked down at her weeping child and froze. She heard a cry, but not her child's. She saw a boy, but not her son. The neural pathways for identity, the fusiform gyrus, had been cauterized by the cosmic wave. Eva backed away, heart hammering. She caught her reflection in the glass. A stranger stared back, mimicking her fear. The realization hit with physical force. Humanity hadn't been killed, it had been erased. In a microsecond, 7 billion people became total strangers. Trust was obsolete. History was broken. This was the Solitude Wave, and in the deafening silence of unrecognizable voices, the true end of the world had begun. The transition was not marked by darkness, but by a horrifying flattening of reality. Inside the emergency room of St. Jude's, the chaotic symphony of beeping monitors, squeaking gurneys, and urgent footsteps continued unabated, yet the texture of the world had irrevocably altered. Dr. Eva Rostova stood frozen near Trauma Bay 4, her hand hovering over a chart she could no longer comprehend. Not because the words were gone, but because the context of her existence had just evaporated. She looked up at the orderly pushing a wheelchair. She knew, intellectually, that this was David. David had a scar on his left eyebrow and a penchant for humming old jazz tunes. But the man before her was a biological cipher. Eva's eyes traced the contours of his face, the slope of the nose, the curve of the jaw, but her brain refused to assemble the puzzle. The features floated in her vision, disconnected and generic. It was like looking at a hyper-realistic mask or a computer-generated composite of human male. There was no spark of recognition, no gut-level sensation of knowing. "David?" she asked, her voice trembling. The orderly stopped. He turned his head, scanning the room with wild, darting eyes. When his gaze landed on Eva, there was no comfort in it, only the primal recoil of a cornered animal. "Who said that?" he demanded. The voice that came from his throat was not David's warm baritone. It was a sound devoid of fingerprint, flat, tonal, and terrifyingly unfamiliar. It sounded like a recording of a voice played through a damp wall. The Solitude Wave had not just erased faces. It had scrubbed the unique harmonic resonance from human speech. "It's me, Dr. Rostova," Eva said, stepping forward. She reached for his arm, a gesture of reassurance she had performed 1,000 times. David, or the stranger occupying David's space, jerked back violently, the wheelchair clattering against the wall. "Stay back," he shouted, raising his hands defensively. "I don't know you. Where's the doctor? Where's Eva?" A cold paralysis seized Eva's chest. He was looking right at her, reading her ID badge, yet he could not map the woman before him to the concept of Eva Rostova stored in his memory. The bridge between perception and identity had collapsed. The panic began to ripple outward from the epicenter of the nursing station. It was a slow-motion catastrophe of dissociation. A woman in the waiting area, clutching a broken wrist, began to scream. She wasn't screaming in pain. She was screaming because the man sitting next to her, her husband of 20 years, had just asked her who she was. Eva watched as the husband stood up, his face a mask of bewildered aggression. "Don't touch me," he stammered, backing away from his wife. "You're not Sarah." "Sarah is, she's here somewhere." He looked around frantically, his eyes sliding over the faces of strangers, searching for a pattern his brain could no longer compute. He was surrounded by people, yet he was utterly, devastatingly alone. The horror of the situation was clinical and precise. As a psychiatrist, Eva understood the mechanics of what was happening, which only made the experience more harrowing. The fusiform gyrus, the brain's specialized hardware for facial recognition, had been switched off. Simultaneously, the phonagnosia had set in, severing the link between voice and identity. They were trapped in a world of biological objects. The uncanny valley had expanded to swallow the entire human race. "Dr. Rostova." Eva spun around. Nurse Miller was running toward her, her eyes wide with tears. Or at least, Eva assumed it was Miller. The woman wore Miller's scrubs, had Miller's height, and wore the silver locket Miller never took off. But the face was a blank slate. "Eva, please," the stranger in Miller's clothes pleaded. I can't recognize anyone. I looked in the mirror in the restroom, and I didn't know who was staring back." Eva grabbed the woman's shoulders, gripping them hard, trying to anchor herself in the physical reality of the moment. "Miller, listen to me. It's happening to everyone. It's a neurological event. A mass event. Is that you, Eva?" Miller asked, squinting, tilting her head as if trying to see through a fog. "You sound like static. You look like a mannequin." "It's me," Eva insisted, though she felt the lie of it. Was she still Eva if no one could verify it? Identity is a social construct, a reflection mirrored back by those around us. If the mirrors are broken, does the image survive? The chaos escalated. At the security desk, a skirmish broke out. A guard was wrestling a man to the ground, a man who claimed to be the chief of surgery. The guard, unable to verify the face, saw only an intruder in a stolen lab coat. Trust had evaporated in seconds. Badges, uniforms, and name tags became the only currency of truth, but even those were suspect. Who could prove they hadn't stolen the badge? Eva realized the hospital was about to become a death trap. In a place reliant on precise communication and trust, this blindness was fatal. She saw a surgeon wandering out of the operating theater, bloody gloves held up, looking at his team with total incomprehension. He didn't know which nurse was his assistant. He didn't know if the patient on the table was the one he was meant to save. "We need to lock down," Eva whispered to herself. She grabbed Miller's hand. "Come with me. To my office. We need to isolate before the violence starts." They moved through the corridors, which had transformed into a gallery of ghosts. People walked past each other with suspicious, narrowed eyes. The air was thick with the murmur of 100 unrecognizable voices, a drone of alien sound. Eva pushed Miller into her office and locked the door, sliding the deadbolt home. The sudden silence of the small room was heavy. Eva leaned against the door, her breath hitching. She looked at her diploma on the wall, her name printed in bold, black letters. Eva Rostova, MD. It felt like an artifact from a dead civilization. She turned to look at Miller, who was sitting on the edge of the examination table, trembling. Eva tried to summon warmth, tried to smile, but she knew Miller would only see the contortion of muscles, the meaningless shifting of skin. "We have to think," Eva said, her voice sounding hollow in her own ears. "We have to find a variable that hasn't changed." Miller looked up, tears streaming down that unfamiliar face. "How can we trust each other, Eva? I know you're wearing Eva's coat. I know you're in Eva's office. But every instinct in my brain is screaming that you are an imposter." "Because I feel it too," Eva admitted, sinking into her chair. "You look like a stranger to me, but I know you have a scar on your knee from a bicycle accident when you were 7. I know you hate coffee, but drink it to stay awake. We have to rely on facts. Data. The visual cortex is lying to us. We have to bypass it." It was then that the phone on her desk blinked. The internal line. It was the secure line from the containment ward, the psychiatric holding cells in the basement. Eva stared at the blinking light. The containment ward was automated mostly, but there was a patient down there, an admission from earlier that morning, before the wave hit. A man brought in by police for erratic but calm behavior in a public disturbance. She picked up the receiver, expecting static or the panicked screaming of a nurse. Instead, a voice came through. It was calm, measured, and unlike every other voice she had heard in the last hour, it carried a strange, rhythmic confidence. It didn't sound familiar, nothing did anymore, but it didn't sound lost. "Dr. Rostova?" the voice asked. "This is patient 8. I imagine things are quite difficult up there right now." Eva griped the phone tighter. "Who is this? How do you know who I am?" "I don't," the man replied, his tone almost amused. "I've never known who anyone is. But I recognize the sound of a world falling apart. I can help you navigate it, doctor. But first, you have to let me out." Eva looked at Miller, then at the locked door. The world outside was dissolving into a nightmare of anonymity. But down in the basement, in the dark, someone claimed to have the map. She realized with a jolt of terror that she had no choice. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. But in a world where everyone was a stranger, the man who had never known a friend might be the only one who could survive. Leaving the sanctuary of her office felt less like stepping into a hallway and more like stepping off a cliff. Eva told Miller to lock the door behind her and not to open it for anyone, not even for her, unless she gave a specific knock pattern. 3 rapid taps, a pause, then 2 slow thuds. It was a primitive code, a regression to tribal signaling in a high-tech facility, but it was the only security left. The hospital corridors were dim. The emergency lighting had flickered on, casting long, skeletal shadows against the walls. The chaotic screaming from earlier had died down, replaced by a suffocating, heavy silence. It was the silence of a predator-filled forest. People were still there, huddled in corners or barricaded in rooms, but the social contract that allowed strangers to coexist had been shredded. Eva moved toward the service elevator, her heels clicking too loudly on the linoleum. She stopped, slipped off her shoes, and carried them. Silence was safety. She passed the waiting room. A group of people stood in a circle, weapons improvised from 4 poles and fire extinguishers in their hands, staring at one another with profound suspicion. They were a pack of wolves who had suddenly forgotten the scent of their kin. Eva hugged the wall, holding her breath, and slipped past them unseen. The elevator ride to the basement was agonizing. The metal box groaned as it descended, taking her away from the natural light and down into the bowels of the building. This was where the psychiatric hold cells were located, secure rooms designed for patients who posed a danger to themselves or others. When the doors slid open, the air was cooler. The basement was a labyrinth of concrete and steel. Eva navigated by memory, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She reached the observation deck for Cell 8. Through the thick, reinforced glass, she saw him. Patient 8, Arthur Vance. He sat on the edge of his cot, hands folded neatly in his lap. He was a man of average build, perhaps in his late 30s, wearing standard-issue hospital scrubs. In a world that had just gone insane, his stillness was deeply unsettling. He wasn't looking at the door, waiting for rescue. He was looking at his own hands, flexing his fingers with a calm, rhythmic fascination. Eva swiped her keycard. The heavy magnetic lock disengaged with a loud clack. She pushed the door open, but stayed in the threshold. Arthur didn't jump. He didn't scream. He simply turned his head. To Eva, his face was the same shifting, unrecognizable blur as everyone else's. It was a terrifying void where a person should be. "Dr. Rostova," Arthur said. His voice was the same one from the phone, level, devoid of the panic static that infected everyone else. "You came. You said you could help," Eva said, her voice tight. She kept one hand on the doorframe, ready to bolt. "You said you know what this is." Arthur stood up. He moved with a fluid, deliberate grace. "I don't know what caused the wave, doctor, but I know the water you're drowning in. I've been swimming in it since the day I was born." He took a step forward, keeping his hands visible. "Congenital prosopagnosia. Face blindness. It's a rare condition for most, usually caused by stroke or trauma. But for me, it was a birth defect. I have never seen a human face in my life. Not my mother's, not my wife's, and certainly not yours." Eva stared at him, the medical implications crashing into her panic. You see us like this always?" "To me," Arthur said softly, "a face is just topography. Hills and valleys of flesh. It contains no information. When I look at you, I don't see Eva. I see a biological object." He tapped his temple. "My brain never learned to decode the signal. So I learned other languages." He gestured for her to come closer. Hesitantly, Eva stepped into the room. "You are terrified," Arthur observed. "Not just because the world is ending, but because you feel blind. You look at your colleagues and you see monsters because your brain is screaming stranger, danger, over and over again. You are addicted to faces, doctor. And now you're going through withdrawal. How do we survive this?" Eva asked, desperation bleeding into her tone. "If I can't trust who anyone is." "Stop looking at their faces," Arthur commanded. The authority in his voice was absolute. "The face is a mask. It always was. People lie with their faces. They smile when they hate you. They look attentive when they are bored. But the body rarely lies." He pointed to Eva's hands. "You wring your fingers when you're processing data. You stand with your weight on your left leg, an old injury perhaps, and your breathing, it catches on the inhale before you speak." Eva froze. She hadn't realized she was doing any of those things. "I know who you are not because of the shape of your nose," Arthur continued, "but because of the rhythm of your existence. That is how I navigate. I memorize the gait, the posture, the cadence of footsteps. The world hasn't changed for me, doctor. Today is just a Tuesday. The only difference is that now, you are all finally down here in the dark with me." A crash echoed from the hallway outside, the sound of metal striking metal, followed by a guttural shout. The violence was spreading downward. Arthur didn't flinch. He tilted his head, listening. 3 men. Heavy boots. Running. They are panicked, aggressive. They aren't looking for help, they are looking for targets. Eva looked at the door, panic rising again. We have to go. My car is in the garage. If we can get out of the city. We can't take the main exit, Arthur said, walking past her into the hallway. He moved with a confidence that Eva found intoxicatingly reassuring. They will be guarding the doors. Identities are gone, so territory is everything now. We need to move through the maintenance tunnels. Eva followed him. It was a surreal inversion of the doctor-patient dynamic. In the lit world of yesterday, she held the power. She was the observer, he was the broken subject. But in the shadow of the Solitude Wave, she was the invalid, and he was the only one who could see. Why help me? Eva whispered as they hurried toward the service corridors. You could just walk out. You're better at this than anyone. Arthur paused at a junction, peering around the corner. He looked back at her, and for a moment, Eva almost imagined she saw a smile on that blank, shifting canvas of a face. Because, Arthur said, for 40 years, I have been the only alien on this planet. I've been the one who couldn't connect. The one who was broken. And now, he gestured to the chaotic world above them. Now that you are all broken, I finally have company. I don't want to be alone anymore, Eva. And you need a guide. He held out his hand. It was a steady, solid thing in a dissolving reality. Trust the hand, Arthur said. Not the face. Eva hesitated for only a fraction of a second. She reached out and gripped his hand. His skin was warm, rough, and unmistakably real. It was the first time since the wave hit that she felt a connection that didn't fracture upon contact. Lead the way, she said. Together, the psychiatrist and the patient stepped into the darkness of the maintenance tunnels, leaving the ruins of identity behind them. They emerged from the subway maintenance hatch 3 blocks away from the hospital, gasping for air that didn't smell of antiseptic and fear. But the air above ground offered no relief. It tasted of ozone and the copper tang of a city holding its breath. Eva pulled her coat tighter around herself. The sky was a bruised purple, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting long, distorted shadows across the pavement. This was her city. She had lived here for 15 years. She knew the rhythm of the traffic, the smell of the bakery on the corner, the specific graffiti on the mailboxes. But as she looked down the avenue, the familiarity was gone. The city had been hollowed out. Cars were abandoned in the middle of the road, their doors left open like winged insects mid-flight. There was no gridlock, just a scattered graveyard of vehicles where drivers had simply stopped, overcome by the sudden inability to process the humanity of the other drivers around them. Keep moving, Arthur whispered. He walked with a steady, ground-eating stride, his eyes scanning the periphery not for faces, but for movement vectors. Don't make eye contact. It triggers an aggression response now. When you look someone in the eye, they expect recognition. When they don't get it, they feel threatened. They walked past a bus stop. A group of 5 people stood there, spaced perfectly 6 feet apart, silent, rigid. They looked like statues in a museum exhibit titled The Commuters. One woman was crying silently, tears tracking down a face that, to Eva, looked like a blurred watercolor painting. The woman held a phone out to a man standing next to her, presumably her husband or brother, showing him a photo. It's me, the woman whispered, her voice flat and unrecognizable. Look at the picture. That's me. That's us. The man looked at the phone, then at the woman, then back at the phone. He shook his head slowly, a look of profound horror in his eyes. He couldn't match the image to the reality. The connection was severed. He backed away, hands raised, treating his loved one like a dangerous stranger attempting a con. Eva felt a sob rise in her throat, but she swallowed it down. They can't see, she murmured. They are looking right at each other, and they are completely alone. They are relying on corrupted data, Arthur said, not slowing down. They are trying to use a map that has been erased. Look at them, Eva. Don't look at their faces. Look at their clothes. The woman is wearing a red scarf. The man has mud on his left boot. That is who they are now. Red scarf and muddy boot. We have entered the era of identifiers. They turned down a residential street. Here, the chaos was more intimate. A front door to a brownstone was smashed open. On the lawn, a pile of family photos had been dumped, as if someone had tried to sort through them and then, in a fit of despair, discarded the evidence of a life they could no longer verify. Eva gripped Arthur's arm. My house is 2 miles north. My husband, Mark, he's there. He works from home. Describe him, Arthur said. Not his face. He's tall, Eva stammered. He has a heavy step. He drags his right foot slightly when he's tired. He wears a wedding band, gold, scratched from when he fixed the deck. Good, Arthur nodded. Hold on to that. The scratch on the ring. The drag of the foot. That is your husband now. If you look for the smile you fell in love with, you will walk right past him. As they moved deeper into the city, the sun vanished, and the streetlights flickered on. The artificial light made the effect of the wave worse. The shadows stretched the blank faces of passers-by into grotesque shapes. They encountered a looting in progress at a local grocery store. But it wasn't a riot. It was eerily quiet. People moved through the broken glass like ghosts, taking cans of food and water, avoiding one another with terrified precision. There was no shouting, no coordination. Just solitary units of survival gathering resources. A man in a business suit walked out with an armful of bread, stepping over the store manager who sat on the curb, staring at his hands, catatonic. Why isn't anyone helping him? Eva asked, horrified. Empathy requires identification, Arthur replied coldly. You help people. You help neighbors. But right now there are no neighbors. There are only biological entities occupying space. The tribe has dissolved, Eva. Without facial recognition, the brain defaults to stranger. And in a crisis, a stranger is an enemy. Suddenly, a figure lunged from the shadows of an alleyway. A young man, wild-eyed, brandishing a heavy flashlight. Who are you? The man screamed, shining the light in Eva's face. Which one are you? Are you them? Eva threw her hands up, blinded by the beam. I'm just trying to get home. The man swung the light wildly. Liar! You all sound the same. My girlfriend came home, but it wasn't her. It wasn't her voice. What did you do to her? He stepped forward, raising the heavy flashlight as a weapon. Eva froze, the primal fear paralyzing her limbs. She saw the violence in his posture, the desperate, terrified rage of a man who had lost his world. Arthur stepped in front of Eva. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't shout. He simply shifted his weight, dropped his center of gravity, and spoke in a voice that cut through the panic like a scalpel. She is wearing hospital scrubs, distinct to St. Jude's, Arthur said, his tone conversational, almost bored. She has a stethoscope in her pocket. You are wearing a mechanic's coverall, labeled Mike. You have grease under your fingernails. You aren't a killer, Mike. You're just a man who can't find his girlfriend. The man froze. The detail, the specific, observable reality, short-circuited his rage. He looked down at his own name tag. I don't know where she is. She is probably looking for you, Arthur said. But if you swing that flashlight, you might kill her in the dark. Go back inside. Lock the door. Wait for daylight. The man lowered the flashlight, trembling. He looked at Arthur with a mixture of awe and confusion. How can you tell? How do you know? I'm paying attention, Arthur said. He took Eva's elbow and guided her past the man, moving them away before the fragile piece could break. When they were a block away, Eva let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She looked at Arthur, really looked at him. The blank oval of his face was still a nightmare to behold, but the set of his shoulders, the calm tilt of his head, it was becoming familiar. You saved us, she said. I analyzed the threat, Arthur corrected. But we are getting close to your territory now, Eva. The danger there will be different. It won't be a stranger with a flashlight. He stopped and turned to her. The danger will be opening your front door and realizing that the man inside doesn't know you. And worse, that you might not believe it's him. We are entering the uncanny valley of your own marriage. Are you ready? Eva looked down the street. Her neighborhood was silent. The houses were dark, save for the flickering blue light of televisions playing to empty rooms. No, Eva whispered. But I have to know. Then let's go, Arthur said. But remember, trust the ring. Trust the foot. Do not trust your eyes. They walked into the darkness of the suburban street, two faceless figures marching toward a reunion that might be a funeral for a marriage. The key slid into the lock with a metallic snick, a sound Eva had heard thousands of times. It was the sound of coming home after a long shift, the sound of safety. But tonight, it sounded like the cocking of a gun. She pushed the door open. The hallway was submerged in shadow. The scent of the house was the same, lemon polish, old books, and the faint, earthy smell of the potted fern in the corner. But the atmosphere had curdled. The silence inside was not peaceful, it was predatory. Arthur stood behind her on the porch, a silent sentinel. Announce yourself, he whispered. Don't surprise him. Surprise is death. Eva took a shaky breath. Mark, she called out. Her voice, stripped of its unique melody by the wave, floated into the dark like dead leaves. Mark, it's Eva. Movement erupted from the kitchen. A figure rushed into the hallway, silhouetted against the dim light of the backyard motion sensor. The man held a heavy object, a baseball bat, raised high. "Stay back!" the man shouted. The voice was a generic, synthesized bark. It wasn't Mark's voice. Mark's voice was warm, deep, with a slight rasp from years of smoking before he quit. This voice was cold, flat static. Eva recoiled, her back hitting Arthur's chest. "Mark, please. It's me." "Liar," the man screamed, swinging the bat in a warning arc. "Eva called me an hour ago. She said she was trapped at the hospital. Who are you? What did you do to her?" Eva's heart shattered. He was looking right at her. The hallway light flickered on, illuminating her face, her scrubs, her terrified eyes. And he saw nothing. Just a biological construct claiming to be his wife. "I am Eva," she cried, tears blurring her vision. "Look at me. Look at my face." "I am looking," Mark yelled, his body trembling with adrenaline and terror. "I'm looking and I don't know who the hell you are. You all look the same. Everyone looks the same." He was hyperventilating. The panic of the Solitude Wave had broken him. He was trapped in a house with a stranger, defending a memory of a wife who no longer existed in the physical realm. Arthur stepped around Eva, moving with that unnerving liquid calm. "Stop," Arthur said. He didn't shout. He didn't raise his hands. He simply projected a sphere of absolute certainty. Mark shifted the bat toward Arthur. "Who is this? You brought a man here?" "I am not the threat," Arthur said, his eyes fixed on Mark's feet. "And neither is she. You are drowning, Mark. You are looking for a picture in a world that has gone blind. Stop looking. Start listening." "Shut up." Mark swung the bat again, hitting the wall. Plaster dust rained down. "Arthur, tell him." Eva grabbed Arthur's arm. "Tell him it's me." Arthur shook his head slowly. "I cannot tell him, Eva. I cannot verify your soul. Only you can do that. But not with your face. Give him the data. Give him the evidence that cannot be forged." Eva looked at the stranger holding the bat. She tried to find Mark in that blank, shifting oval of a face. She couldn't. It was a nightmare. She was married to a void. She forced herself to look down. She looked at his legs. He was shifting his weight to his left side. His right foot was turned slightly inward. The drag. The phantom ache from the ACL tear 5 years ago. She looked at his hands, gripping the bat until the knuckles were white. On the ring finger of the left hand, a gold band caught the light. It had a deep, horizontal scratch across the surface. "The deck," Eva whispered. The man froze. "What?" Eva took a step forward, ignoring the weapon. "The deck," she said, her voice trembling but gaining strength. 3 years ago, you were sanding the back deck. You refused to take your ring off. You said it was bad luck. You slipped with the sander and scratched the gold. I told you to get it buffed out. You said no. You said it gave the ring character." The bat lowered an inch. The man's breathing hitched. "The night before our wedding," Eva continued, stepping closer, "you couldn't sleep. We sat on the floor of the hotel room and ate cold pizza. You told me you were terrified that you wouldn't be a good enough father because your own dad left. I told you that you were the man who stayed." The bat clattered to the floor. The man collapsed to his knees, his hands coming up to cover that terrible, unrecognizable face. Sobs racked his body, sounds that were still alien, still generic, but the rhythm of the grief was unmistakable. Eva rushed to him. She fell to her knees and wrapped her arms around him. She smelled his shirt, laundry detergent and sawdust. She felt the solid warmth of his chest. But when she pulled back to look him in the eyes, the horror remained. She was holding a stranger. The neural connection was dead. She felt the love in her memory, but her eyes saw only a mannequin. "I can't see you," Mark wept, gripping her arms so hard it hurt. "Eva, I'm looking right at you and I can't find you." "I know," Eva whispered, pressing her forehead against his. "I can't see you either. We are blind, Mark. We are both blind." Arthur stood by the door watching them. He didn't smile. This wasn't a happy ending, it was a survival strategy. "This is the world now," Arthur said quietly. "The intuition is gone. The spark is gone. You will have to build your love out of facts. You will have to verify each other every single day. You will never simply know again. You will have to decide." Eva looked up at Arthur, then back at Mark. She took Mark's hand and traced the scratch on the ring with her thumb. It was cold, hard metal. It was the only truth left. "We stay inside," Eva said to Mark, her voice hardening. "We lock the doors. We cover the windows. We don't look at faces anymore. We listen to the footsteps." Mark nodded, wiping his eyes. He looked at Arthur. Who is he? Eva stood up, pulling Mark with her. She looked at Arthur, the man who had lived in the dark his whole life, the only pilot in this new storm. He is the only one who can see, Eva said. She went to the window and pulled the curtains shut, blocking out the chaotic, faceless city outside. The room plunged into semi-darkness. In the gloom, the lack of features didn't matter as much. Eva sat on the couch, pulling Mark down beside her. Arthur took the armchair opposite them. They sat in silence, three strangers in a broken world, listening to the wind howl outside, a wind that sounded exactly the same as it always had, indifferent and cold. The Solitude Wave had taken their faces, but it had left them their fear, and in that fear, they found a new, terrifying kind of family. Eva closed her eyes. In the dark, she could almost remember what Mark looked like. Almost. The scariest part of the Solitude Wave isn't the science fiction, it's the fragility of how we connect with one another. If this story of isolation and the desperate search for identity resonated with you, please subscribe and turn on notifications. We are building a library of high-concept horror that challenges the way you see the world. Leave a comment below. If you couldn't recognize the faces of your loved ones, how would you prove who they are? Your support helps us create the next chapter. Thank you for watching.